edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting under the overall banner of BabyAngelGeronimo editions. So this is the BabyAngelGeronimo editions, Khoodeelaar television channel, part 2 of the day, timed at 22:30 GMT UK, Wednesday, the 5th of October 2022. Written, presented, and edited by Muhammad Haque, BabyAngelGeronimo editions Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, and not on cable platforms. Now, this is the day, 5th of October 2022, when it's a kind of advanced copy of the so-called satirical magazine, Private Eye, which, for factual evidential reasons, we have retitled as Private Lies, despite the fact that it has got aspects to it that are worth noting. We shall come to that in a second. And Private Lie is, quote, edited by the midget Ian Pissoff. Ian Pissoff is a liar, habitual liar, and along with Paul Martin, Pissoff has been paid at the rate approximately in today's prices, let's say, 20 to 21,000 pounds per episode of the Have I Got News for You on BBC One. And that is one of the most brazen excuses which the BBC crooks have used to bribe this criminal, Ian Pissoff, in order to buy his silence or strategic silence over the many things that they know could have been exposed about the BBC corruption had Ian Pissoff not been bought. So whatever appears in the Private Lie magazine, apparently as critical of the BBC, is as nothing compared to the whatever could appear or could have appeared, because BBC still remains one of the numerically and financially largest employers and outfits in the media field. And by definition, those numbers entail lots and lots of disputes and lots of cover up and so on. The BBC, because of the position that it has been allowed to enjoy over the last few decades since it was founded in the 1920s, has kind of captured the mind of the Little Englanders almost in the same way as the family of Brendas and Bryans. And so therefore anything to do with the BBC is of significance, is of note, even if the contents are not necessarily agreed with by the third parties observers. Now, this edition of the Private Lie, number 1583, which is dated the 7th of October until the 20th of October 2022, 7th meaning 2 days from now, Friday the 7th of October. On the front page is, in my view, in terms of current affairs and the current goings on, this front page with the bubbles contains much more creative and comprehensive kind of captions than it has been a long time for Private Lie to run, because most of the Private Lie covers printed during the congenital liar Boris Johnson's time at number 10 Downing Street, or as leader of the Conservative Party, have been banal, and that persistent banality suggests that Private Lie didn't want to sink the congenital liar Boris Johnson too soon, or didn't want to take part in sinking him. And it didn't, because Private Lie, under the midget Ian Pissoff's so-called decision-making, censored or suppressed most of the criminality that Boris Johnson indulged in. And it only gave expression to a very small number or proportion of criminality perpetrated by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. Now, there is a similarity between the midget's outlook and the congenital liar's outlook, because the similarity is about, as we call this, the BabyAngelGeronimo editions. Similarity is to be found in the behavior of the midget, who actually colluded post facto with the liar Boris Johnson and his stance in condemning BabyAngelGeronimo. And the midget, anyone who has suffered the actual television or video images of the young piece of the midget, when he smiles, the smile doesn't come across as a natural smile. It comes across as a kind of labored, troubled, in struggle smile, artificial, false, fabricated, and so on. And the jokes that the liar, Ian Pissoff, kind of spews, the jokes never come across as genuine, spontaneous, authentic, naturally conceived. The jokes come across as having been labored and worked on and beaten up in the process by a number of people before being made, quote, presentable by the very unfunny face of the Pissoff. Now, the Pissoff also has been showing persistent signs of egotism in, for example, in the podcast so-called, that is the podcast that is broadcast annually about the annual event. I mean, Pissoff dominates the actual podcast, whereas there are about 3 or 4 other so-called guests who are kind of selected from among regular contributors and characters featured in Private Eye over the years. But none of those gets to go present a really humorous kind of series or humorous present or make humorous presentation of the Private Lie year. And the racist, frantic swine never appears. Now, that is something that the swine has done for as long as he has been performing the main task of editing the paper, because it's frantic swine who does the main work and does edit the paper. He doesn't appear, but those who do appear could make contributions to the podcast, but the Pissoff appears to be quite jealous of the others, and so he keeps the presenting and the bogus, unfunny laughter items to himself. And in the presentation, the event never comes across as being elegant, never comes across as being coherent, never comes across as being on the spot. I mean, in the or kind of to the point, let's say, spot on, let's say. It comes across as being belated, labored, and some kind of artificially stolen and patched together. And the individual contributions made by the other two or three sound and come across as being, again, unspontaneous. Now, why am I saying those things about those items? Because if anyone objectively took into account their years' collection of coverage of the corrupt British politicians and politics in private eye, by a private eye, let's say, it would become very clear that there are far more entertaining contents in the year's coverage than have ever been given expression to in the podcast that is fronted by Jan Pissoff. And Pissoff also has been inserting his own image on the kind of lookalike bits in the private eye letters column. Okay, so one of the main attractions, if you like, in terms of intellectual urgency is the page called Rotten Boroughs. In today's edition, that is the advanced copy that I bought from Tesco's, today's edition of Private Lie, that is issue number 1583, at, let's say, what page is it? So the page 21 is the Rotten Boroughs column. And there are three columns, literally three columns in the main column. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 items only. The longest one is about Croydon, and the second longest one appears to be about Waltham Forest. And the third is about the Information Commissioner being involved in what council is it they're talking about? So the Information Commissioner, this Rotten Boroughs column writer is saying, has delivered a devastating rebuke to the city of Stoke, I think, in freedom of information, etc. Now, the Information Commissioner is not the subject of our discussion this time, but on the evidence of their behavior since the Information Commissioners or Commissioners founded, there has been no devastating ruling by the Information Commissioner about any council. And the reason why this Rotten Boroughs column is so kind of timid is because the guy who puts it together is himself a right-wing reactionary, posing as a kind of investigative thing. He has never broken anything. And I said that including the fact that the Private Lie did publish that halal dead meat in October 2000 10. Just a few days before the Towners Council's executive mayor election was due to be held and was held. On that same kind of occasion, the item that the halal dead meat item that Private Lie carried contained about 10 different aspects of the corruption at that time, criminality and lying, both in the council and both on the part of the candidates, including Lutfur Rahman. And yet, Private Lie, Rotten Boroughs, has never followed up any of those, including its own claim that Abbas Uddin alias Halal was the beneficiary of the theft of votes belonging to dead people. Think about that. Votes belonging to dead people were used in the internal election of the then Spitalfields Housing Association or Cooperation. Cooperative. And it was suggested in that piece, Halal Dead Meat, that Abbasuddin alias Halal had been asked at least 4 times to confirm whether he was the dead voters vote, stolen votes kind of beneficiary, usurper, exploiter under the name of Candidate A. And Private Lie said in that same issue, Halal Dead Meat, that Abbasuddin alias Halal lost mysteriously, surprisingly, he lost his power of speech when asked to confirm whether he was the candidate called Candidate A, for whose benefit the votes belonging to the dead voters had been stolen or kind of allocated or assigned. That was the Spitalfields Housing Cooperative, which is no longer known as the cooperative. Spitalfields Housing Cooperative, which was the natural product of the campaigns that we did for housing rights and came to life at the beginning of the 1990s. Spitalfields Housing Cooperative came into life at the beginning of the 1990s, and shortly afterwards, the same initiative created the Spitalfields Small Business Association, which followed about 2-3 years afterwards. Now, the actual chronological history of those 2 organizations is part of the movement defending the community in the East End of London, that I am the exclusive, world exclusive commentator of, historian of, observer of, and I shall be sharing all my knowledge, observations, and thoughts in due course. I alone know all the angles, and I alone have been telling the truth. None has been telling anything like the truth or a fraction of the truth. None meaning those who have been sitting on the cooperatives committees. And I would say that more than one individual, that is more than or in addition to Abbasuddin alias Hilal, several other individuals who have been on the board, on the committee of the cooperative, several other individuals have behaved with the sole purpose of being able to steal the resources, enrich themselves, and so on. Now, those have included other councillors as well. One councillor who is now dead, a former councillor who was a councillor for a very short period, he belonged to the then SDP Lib Dem or SDP Liberal Council kind of group or party. He was prosecuted for housing fraud or for abusing his position as a councillor to get himself housing benefit or benefit himself in housing. His name was Sajjad Mia. He was prosecuted as a criminal prosecution. But at the very last minute, a very strange excuse was created whereby one of his brothers was blamed for the crimes that Sajjad Mia was prosecuted for. It was like a mysterious thing that happened with the prosecution, non-prosecution of Afsana Begum much later. Because as we have said at the time, the prosecution of Afsana Begum over housing fraud or housing abuse was operated as a circus by the sitting judge or judges at the Snaresbrook Crown Court, as well as by the lawyers. Even the lawyers that apparently appeared for the prosecuting body, the Tower Hamlets Council itself. What I'm saying is that all the corruption that goes on in Tower Hamlets goes on and has gone on because of the direct and active, persistent participation in the fraud and corruption by several practicing law traders. So Tower Hamlets Council is corrupt. The community that the Tower Hamlets Council is supposed to serve is betrayed and let down by the crooks in the council. And in the council, such outfits as the then not operating or alive anymore, Tower Hamlets Law Center. These outfits are and have been totally corrupt and controlled by crooks and criminals, and of course, racists. I mean, one multifarious criminal, and I'm calling his name out, Sumi Roy, was called Roy Minkoff. This creep was involved at the early stages of the formation of the Tower Hamlets Law Center. It became the Tower Hamlets Law Center after at least two separate centers were merged. One was quite well known comparatively. It's called West Stepney Law Center. Roy Minkoff fucked up the Tower Hamlets law center. And Roy Minkoff was a liar, and he's now, that creep is now and has been for a very long time, quietly installed as the in-house lawyer of the corrupt National Union of Journalists. Minkoff doesn't come out of the shell. So all this criminality that goes on in Tower Hamlets goes on not because only kind of ordinarily understood criminals are engaged in the crimes, but these criminals are partners among the licensed law traders. Not only that, these partners are also belonging and have belonged to the local council and the local council's so-called legal section. When Richard Morey kind of looked at the petition against Luthraman, Richard Morey must have noticed immediately that something was odd in the name of the list of the defendants. Because Morey, by all of his expressions, insinuations, is himself a racist. And I don't say this in order to help in any way any assertion by Luthraman or his handlers. They want to call Richard Morey a racist for their own reasons. I don't. My reasons are objective. And my reasons are distinguished from the corrupt pretexts of Luthraman and his handlers by the fact that I have always maintained, right from the beginning of the publication of the ruling on the 23rd of April 2015, that Morey was a racist, but that racism did not dominate his examination of the evidence before him. And that even if he were racist throughout the examination of the evidence, the way he presented the existing law and legal kind of antecedents made it very clear that the conclusion of his consideration of the petition against Luthraman could not end by allowing Luthraman to continue in post. Luthraman's career at that point had to be brought to an end. Remember what I've just said. And in any case, Luthraman and his handlers are morally dead. They cannot morally expose the racism of Richard Morey. They have not been able to. And they will never be able to. Because they are immoral and they are capitulative of racists like Morey. What do? These cowards go to the racists and suck up to the racists and touch their feet and seek the racists' approval. So when Morey saw the name of Williams as the second defendant after Luther in the court case or the application, the petition, Morey was very, very surprised. Because this Williams was a racist, and of course he was a white man. And Mori knew that if he had to apply the same laws against Williams as he was going to have to apply against Lutfur Rahman, then that would undermine the finding against Lutfur Rahman. Because that would take the shift, that would shift the blame, the liability away from the shoulders of Lutfur Rahman and distribute it to the shoulders of Williams. Get it? So Mori wanted desperately badly to find an excuse to get rid of this part of the petition that implied Williams as a wrongdoer as well. So as soon as they found the pretext, Mori dropped Williams from the list. And once he had dropped Williams, he could focus on Lutfur Rahman solely, which is what he did. Remember? So I'm saying this to Mori, don't you dare fantasize that I haven't noticed your racism. Crafty little racist. You let Williams, the racist, get away. But Williams will not get away from the evidence that makes him guilty. He may not be guilty of the same kind of technical or technically describable offenses. But Williams was responsible as a liar, as a fraudster, as a colluder. Now, we go to Croydon now. Because in Croydon, as we have been saying, that in addition to Tower Hamlets, Newham, Hackney and Lewisham, the creeps have got another executive mayor foisted in Croydon. Now, any keen observer of these various tactical things that the criminals in Tower Hamlets did in order to have the referendum calling for an elected mayor, the real referendum would have been scuppered and there would have been no mayor election in October 2010. But the project of having an elected mayor, of course, was jointly operated by the handlers of Lutfur Rahman in the complex called the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Center. And those handlers' clear objective was stated on the television program called Dispatches that Andrew Gilligan personally presented, and it was aired on the 1st of March 2010 on Channel 4 television. Now, if Croydon wasn't part of the four kind of mayored boroughs at that time, or not even in the running, but of course, Croydon has become the fifth London borough with the elected mayor foisted on the population. And why am I talking about Croydon? Because of the crook, Carswell. Carswell is the professional career criminal who has been contaminating far too many local borough councils in the UK, well, in England. She gets the job of chief executive and then she fucks up the council and she fucks up democracy and so on. And nobody has held Carswell to any account in her long corrupt career. Carswell needs prosecuting, but so far she has not been prosecuted. Now, what she has been doing is hiding the full report authored by Richard Penn. Richard Penn is a campaigning individual who was commissioned to do a report about Croydon's corruption. And Penn's report was published about a month ago. Well, not published, but made available to the council. And instead of publishing that report to the councillors and to the local community, Catherine Carswell, the criminal, has created a kind of iron bolts in the Croydon Council and has hidden the report in the iron bolts. Now, because of the sensitive nature of the allegations and the evidence found in the short run kind of investigation by Penn, it is understandable why some of the details will be kind of immediately usable as the most explosive political material. Essentially, the Croydon Council criminals are, in fact, the criminals in the Labour Party, the controlling Labour Party. Because the Labour Party in Croydon carried on stealing the resources and lying to the people of Croydon for years and years and years. And those who campaigned against the corruption of Croydon Council mainly belong to the Lib Dems. Now, any observer of the evidence of the Lib Dems' behavior would know that why we call them dumps, because they're dumb. They're dummies. They're completely stupid. Because instead of campaigning for an end to the corrupt system, the Lib Dems completely stupidly started campaigning for Croydon to have an elected mayor. And I told them at the time that if they did that, then that would guarantee Croydon sinking forever into the mire of corruption, the ditch of corruption forever. And the Lib Dems would not get the benefit that they were expecting they would get by the tactical collusion with the crooks. In the end, the vote for an elected mayor went through, and the candidate, the conservative candidate for mayor, got elected as the mayor of Croydon. And so the Croydon people have elected a conservative mayor. And the council is now conservative controlled. Bad enough. But in the last month or so, the Al Jazeera English channel produced an investigation report into Croydon, which includes revelations that for many years, the Labour Party, the UK Labour Party headquarters, was given direct information about Labour Party corruption in Croydon. And the Labour Party headquarters was told in explosive expressions of clear prediction and truth that if the Labour Party didn't take any action against Croydon crooks in the Labour Party in Croydon, then it would be a big, big disaster, which it has been. All the criminals, chief executive, etc., in Croydon, with their hands in the till, have got away. But they shouldn't have got away. There should have been clear prosecution against all these criminals. Now, the fact that they have got away, and instead of campaigning for the prosecution of these criminals, Croydon Lib Dems diverted the whole thing and gave the biggest excuse to the Labour Party crooks by saying that Croydon's problems could only be solved by having an elected mayor. So the Croydon conservatives cannot kind of believe their good fortune. And Catherine, I haven't got the correct words to use on a live television broadcast about this criminal, this evil one. She was hired by Ruxana Fiaz to sort out Neom Council's corruption and criminality and cover up whatever. And Carswell did the fiddling with Rukhsana Fiaz for as long as she could. And then it became unsustainable. I started the campaign against Carswell in Newham, and Carswell couldn't answer the questions. And I demanded action by the liar, Rukhsana Fiaz, who couldn't take action and couldn't answer my questions. Whatever the impact I had on the two of them, Carswell decided to leave Newham. And after Carswell left Newham, she was officially not on the payroll of any organization, but she did receive thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds from Newham Council as well as from other councils, because Catherine Carswell is one of the most notorious criminals operating in the English local council circuit. She is the biggest fleecer of local councils. Now, even Private Lie admits that Private Lie itself, cannot get to the bottom of all the facts. And it hasn't got anywhere near uncovering Carswell, as Private Lie has not come anywhere near uncovering what happened in the 2012 Olympics in Stratford. Well, the crook Robin Wales was the mayor at the expense of Newham, elected mayor. The history of Newham and criminality through the council is potentially an explosive history that would destroy the careers of literally hundreds of people. And Newham Council has been involved with organized gangsters in the East End of London. And Robin Wales has been involved with organized gangsters. And so on and so on and so on. So when Private Lie got hold of the copy of a book by one of the reporters attached to the Sunday Times, the Private Lie didn't publish any of it. It kind of insinuated and it tickled. It published tickly things, not serious stuff about the heavy duty corruption and gangster domination of Newham Council that had taken place. So it is interesting that Private Lie is running this one today in the latest edition. But I would be surprised if Private Lie goes to any logical point about the corruption which Catherine Carswell has been part of and party to. The corruption of Rukhsana Fiaz and corruption of Lutfur Rahman. Because by definition, the whole idea of a local council having an elected mayor, executive mayor, is a stealing idea. That is to say, it is intended, designed to break the main provisions of the Theft Acts of 1968 and 1978. Because in the English law, currently, there are two main pieces of legislation about theft. One is the one passed in 1978 called the Theft Act. And the other is, of course, the one 1978. So one is 68 and the other is 78. And because I wasn't present in the House of Parliament when they debated the so-called provisions, I cannot recall any excitable aspects of the behavior of the members of Parliament when they debated the two acts in due course. The fact that the Labour Party headquarters knew about the Croydon criminality in the Labour Party in Croydon and colluded with them and didn't do anything must not be treated as an exception. As I have said before, I created the atmosphere in 1990 in Tower Hamlets so that the Labour Party would lose the 1990 council election. And before I achieved that objective, I had told the then leader of the Labour Party nationally, Neil the Crook Kinnock, I had said that if he, Neil the Crook Kinnock, failed to act on my demands against the crooks in Tower Hamlets Council, Tower Hamlets Labour Party, then I would make it my task. I would make it my task to facilitate the political extinction of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets at that election, which I did. So the moron, Neil Kinnock, never got in touch after that because I had kept my word and I had established enough pressure among the crooks in the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets for them to realize that their criminality would not be and was not going to be forgotten. So that was in 1990. That was in 1990. I think before this boy Lutfor even left school. And I'm sure his cognitive impairment was as present then as it was exposed to be present in his personality, in his psychology in October 2010, when he completely misunderstood the question put to him by the evening No Standers David Cohen. Neil Kinnock, of course, later became a commissioner in the European Union. I think Neil Kinnock is one of the criminals that really discredited the idea of the European Union because he fleeced the European Union, as did Peter Mandy Malderson. So before blaming everything, Brexit, on Nigel Nasty Farage, objectivity demands that due attention is paid to the likes of the crook Neil Kinnock and the crook Peter Mandy Mandelson. These crooks created an art form which they used to loot money from the European Union. And they discredited the image of the European Union. Now, Catherine Carswell in Croydon, what has she been doing in the report, the Penn report? I mean, she has been behaving in the most absurd way, in the medieval way. The report she guards instead of acts on the evidence of the report to stop corruption. She guards the report as if it's a live entity, and if she allows people to read it, the report will jump out of the captivity and make public all the secrets about the Curtin Council's corruption and criminality. So, what Carswell does, she invites individual councillors who request copies of the report. She asks them to come in, and then she kind of surrounds them with security personnel, takes them to a dark room where she gives only partial light and lets them see the dim lit copies of the pages of the Penn report. That's what she has been doing. That is not the description given by Private Lie, but that is what she has been doing. Catherine Carswell imprisons Croydon councillors and subjects them to this ordeal when they make the criminal offense of asking to see the copy of the Penn report. Now, that kind of behavior is not publicly reported, but that goes on in most institutions, including in the courts of law, so called. In Tower Hamlets, the criminal regime of Lutfur Rahman was kind of ridiculed and mocked by the likes of Ted Jury and Mark Baines, who is apparently now deceased. Without the actual crimes being published, which is why I have been referring to Ted Jury and his complicity with aspects of the criminal gangs in Tower Hamlets. And the silence that Ted Jury has been maintaining for the last 5 years, 6 years, since Richard Morey ousted Lutf Rahman on the 23rd of April 2015. Why has Ted Jury been maintaining silence? We shall be talking about all of that. We shall be talking about all of that in due course, not necessarily in the rest of this edition, because we are coming to bring this particular edition to a close. We shall be continuing all the other topics of the main frequency in due course in the subsequent editions. So the time is now 23:19 hours GMT on 1:5 of October 2022, and over to the British Standard Time, which is midnight 19 hours on Thursday, the 6th of October 2022,